Let's run a thought experiment. Imagine that over the next few decades, through some combination of artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation, 99% of the jobs that currently exist are done better, faster, and cheaper by machines than by humans. Not some jobs, not most jobs, 99%. The surgeon replaced by a robotic system that never tires, never makes an error, and has read every medical paper ever published. The lawyer replaced by an AI that can process case law at a speed no human can match. The teacher replaced by a personalized learning system that adapts to each student in real time. The builder replaced by construction robots, the driver replaced by autonomous vehicles, the creative replaced by generative AI, the analyst replaced by systems that never sleep, 99%. What happens? Not to the economy, not to productivity, not to GDP. Those questions matter, but they are not the interesting ones. What happens to us? Work is not just an economic activity. It is one of the primary ways human beings construct meaning, identity, and social connection. Think about what work gives you beyond the salary. A reason to get up in the morning, a structure to your day, a community of people you see regularly, a sense of competence, of being good at something, a contribution to something larger than yourself, a story about who you are. When someone asks you who you are, the first thing most people say is what they do, not where they live, not who they love, what they do. I'm a doctor. I'm a teacher. I'm an engineer. Work is not just how we earn, it is how we define ourselves. Remove 99% of work, and you remove the scaffolding that organises most human lives. That is not an argument against automation. The same argument could have been made about the agricultural revolution. What will people do when they don't need to spend all day growing food? Or the industrial revolution? What will people do when machines do the manual labour? In both cases, the answer turned out to be that humans found new things to do. New forms of work emerged that nobody could have predicted. But this time, something is different. And it is worth sitting with what that difference actually is. Previous waves of automation replaced physical labour. Machines that could lift, carry, dig, weave, assemble. The jobs they replaced were demanding and often dangerous. And while the transition was painful and took generations, the things that machines could not do, think, create, empathise, judge, connect, remained human territory. The current wave is replacing cognitive labour, the thinking itself. And the question of what remains exclusively human, when machines can also think, is genuinely harder to answer. There is a vision of what this could look like that I find genuinely compelling. You probably know it. It has warp drives and holographic crew members and alien diplomacy. But beneath all of that, it is making a specific and serious claim about what human civilization could become. In Star Trek, work in the economic sense has essentially disappeared. There is no money in the Federation. Material needs are met by replicators. Nobody works because they have to. And yet humans are fully engaged. They explore, they create, they discover. They wrestle with ethical dilemmas and philosophical questions. They form deep relationships. They pursue mastery in fields they care about. They contribute to something larger than themselves. The claim is that given genuine freedom from economic necessity, given the removal of the need to work in order to survive, humans would not collapse into purposeless hedonism. They would flourish. They would find meaning in exactly the things that make us most distinctly human. That is an optimistic vision, perhaps naively optimistic, but it is grounded in something real about human psychology. We do not only work because we have to. We also work, or at least the best version of work feels like, because creating, contributing, and connecting are intrinsically satisfying. The question is whether a society that automated away the economic necessity of work could successfully cultivate the conditions for that kind of human flourishing, or whether without the structure and purpose that economic necessity provides, most people would struggle to find their own. Before we get carried away with the Star Trek vision, it is worth sitting seriously with the counterarguments, because there are several, and they are not trivial. The first is what we might call the meaning crisis problem. Money is not what work primarily provides. We established that. What work provides is structure, identity, community, and purpose. Studies of long-term unemployment, even in countries with generous benefits, consistently show elevated rates of depression, anxiety, social isolation, and loss of self-worth. The check arrives, the meaning doesn't. People who retire early and find it liberating are often people who had strong identities, interests, and social networks outside of work. People who retire early and find it devastating are often people whose entire sense of self was built around their professional role. Remove the role, and there is nothing underneath. Extrapolate that to a society where 99% of economic roles have disappeared, and you are not looking at a population of Picards and Crushers eager to explore the galaxy. You are looking at a significant proportion of people who have lost the primary structure around which their lives were organised, with nothing guaranteed to replace it. The second problem is power and ownership. The Star Trek Federation is a post-scarcity society where the means of production, the replicators, the energy systems, the infrastructure are collectively owned and their benefits universally shared. That is a political choice embedded in the fiction. In the real world, the machines that are replacing human labour are privately owned. The productivity gains from automation flow primarily to those who own the capital. We have been watching this happen for decades already. The share of economic output going to labour has been declining relative to capital across most developed economies since the 1980s. Automation accelerates this trend. A world where machines do 99% of the work, but the machines are owned by a small number of individuals and corporations, is not a Star Trek future. It is something much closer to a feudal one. Universal abundance requires universal ownership, or at minimum, deliberate and significant redistribution of the productivity gains. Neither is guaranteed, neither is even currently on the political agenda at the required scale. The third problem is the transition. Even if the destination is ultimately good, even if we eventually build something resembling the Federation, the journey could be catastrophic for the people living through it. Previous technological transitions took generations. The agricultural revolution unfolded over centuries. The Industrial Revolution displaced handloom weavers and artisans over decades, and even at that pace produced enormous human suffering, child labour, urban squalor, and social dislocation before the benefits became broadly accessible. The current wave of AI-driven automation may happen significantly faster. Human psychology adapts slowly. Social institutions adapt slowly. Political systems adapt slowly. The gap between the speed of technological change and the speed of human and institutional adaptation is where real suffering lives, not in the abstract future, but in the lives of specific people whose skills become obsolete faster than they can retrain, whose communities collapse faster than new ones can form. And the fourth problem, perhaps the most uncomfortable, is the boredom problem. Star Trek presents a very specific human psychological profile. The Enterprise crew are relentlessly curious, driven, purposeful people who would be miserable without challenge and discovery. They represent a particular kind of human flourishing, but not everyone is Picard. Not everyone has a latent passion waiting to be expressed the moment economic necessity is removed. For many people, the honest answer to "what would you do if you never had to work again" is not explore the galaxy, or write the novel, or volunteer in the community. It is a more uncomfortable answer, involving a great deal of television and a gradual loss of direction. This is not a criticism of those people. It is an observation about human psychology that any serious vision of post-work society has to contend with. The Star Trek future requires not just the removal of economic necessity, but the cultivation of meaning, purpose, and community at a societal scale. That is a much harder problem than building the replicator. The honest answer is that we don't know. We have never tried it at scale. There are small-scale experiments, Nordic countries with strong social safety nets, basic income pilots in various countries, communities built around voluntary contribution rather than economic exchange. The evidence from these experiments is mixed and contested. What they do suggest is that the transition matters as much as the destination. A society that arrives at post-work gradually, with the institutions and culture to support it, universal basic services, meaningful community structures, education focused on human flourishing rather than employability, looks very different from a society where automation happens faster than the social structures can adapt. leaving people economically displaced without the support to find new meaning. The Star Trek future is not inevitable. It is one possible outcome of a technological transition that could also go very differently. The version where the benefits of automation accrue almost entirely to those who own the machines, where the majority of people find themselves economically unnecessary and without the safety net or social support to navigate that, where work disappears faster than meaning can be found to replace it. That version is also possible. It is arguably more consistent with historical patterns of how technological transitions have actually played out, at least in the short term. The difference between the two outcomes is not primarily technological. The technology will do what the technology does. The difference is political, cultural, and institutional. What we decide to do with the productivity gains that automation generates. Whether we use them to free people, genuinely free them with the support and resources to pursue meaningful lives, or whether we allow them to concentrate in the hands of those who already have the most. When could this happen? The honest answer is that nobody knows. Not in the sense of false modesty, genuinely nobody knows. The rate of AI progress is real and accelerating. The tasks that AI cannot do are fewer with each passing year. There are serious people who believe significant job displacement is decades away. There are equally serious people who believe it will happen faster than any previous technological transition in history. What seems clear is that the question is no longer theoretical. We are already living in the early stages of a transition that previous generations could only imagine. The question of what humans do when machines can do most things is not a question for a distant future. It is a question for this generation. And the answer, whatever it is, will be shaped by choices we are making right now about how to build economies, institutions, and cultures capable of supporting human flourishing in a world where the old answer to "what do you do?" no longer applies to most people. What would I choose given the option? The Star Trek version, obviously. A world where nobody needs to work to survive, where curiosity drives human effort rather than necessity, where the question is not what can you do that a machine cannot, but what do you want to do with the gift of time and freedom that technology has made possible. That world is not guaranteed, but it is possible, and the gap between possible and inevitable is exactly where human choices, political, economic, cultural, do their work. The irony is not lost on me. If AI does away with 99% of jobs, the most important remaining work will be the work of deciding what kind of society we want to build with the freedom that creates. That work at least seems safely human for now. Next time, we go further. See you then. If this gave you something to think about, hit like. It helps more people find the channel. Subscribe for a new video every Monday. The future isn't going to wait, neither should we.